All you need is a cup or mug or glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens now. Go. Yeah, that's good. Okay, we're locked in. That first sip always recalibrates the system. The universe is still the same broken carnival it was 5 minutes ago, but now the tilt is a little more tolerable. Today's menu is a perfect snapshot of the American operating system running on fumes. Elite kids dealing coke in the shadows of a football cathedral. A rocket that went walkabout for 3 weeks and somehow got a tow to Christmas Island. Google vacuuming up the digital corpse of a budget airline. A guy who beat a murder rap strolling out of a Virginia facility on a weekend pass like it's spring break. And Nike stock sliding back to 2014 prices, while the brand that once owned cool keeps forgetting how to be cool. 5 stories, 1 pattern. Let's walk through them the way a systems guy walks through a malfunctioning factory. Start with the Penn State fraternity cocaine ring. 14 charged. Not 2, not 5, 14. That's not a side hustle. That's a logistics network with inventory management, distribution nodes, and probably a shared Google sheet for who owes what. Fraternities have always been parallel economies. The official economy is the university: tuition, grades, donors, football. The unofficial economy is the one that actually runs the social operating system: alcohol, status, and now, apparently, powdered status. Cocaine is just the current high-margin product. 10 years ago, it was pills. 20 years ago, it was weed. The product changes. The system stays the same. Young men with excess testosterone, underdeveloped prefrontal cortices, and a culture that treats risk as a competitive sport will always find a way to monetize the demand that the adults pretend doesn't exist. What fascinates me is the institutional blindness. Penn State has spent decades perfecting the art of looking the other way when the football program is involved. Now, the same machinery is applied to the Greek system. The university's real product isn't education, it's the credential and the network. As long as the network keeps producing donors and the football team keeps filling the stadium, the internal black markets are treated like weather. Unfortunate, but not existential. Until the feds show up with indictments, and then suddenly everyone is shocked. Shock is the public performance. The private reality is that every large university knows exactly which houses are running side businesses. They just calculate the expected value of intervention versus the expected value of looking the other way. Looking the other way usually wins until the body count or the headline count gets too high. This is also a talent stack story. The kids who can organize a cocaine distribution network across multiple houses while maintaining a 3.2 GPA and a rush calendar have real skills: risk assessment, compartmentalization, persuasion, logistics. In a saner society, those skills would be directed at building something that doesn't involve federal prison. In this one, the highest status path for a certain personality type is still the underground one. The legal system will process them. Some will get probation, a few will get real time, and the next cohort will simply tighten operational security. The system doesn't change. The players just get better at not getting caught. Now pivot to SpaceX towing Ship 40 to Christmas Island after 24 days adrift. This is the opposite energy. While universities are incubating black markets, Elon is incubating the future and occasionally losing a multi-ton stainless steel tube in the Pacific. 24 days. That's not a minor mishap. That's a full-blown oceanic adventure. The ship is out there doing its best impression of a ghost vessel, and instead of writing it off, they go get it. Tow it to Christmas Island. I love the poetry of that. Christmas Island is one of those places that sounds like it was invented by a novelist who wanted the name to do too much work. And yet, here we are, the most advanced rocket company on Earth, sending a recovery team to a speck in the Indian Ocean because the hardware still has value and the data still has value. This is classic SpaceX. They treat failure as a data collection method rather than a career-ending event. Most aerospace companies would have held a press conference, issued a carefully lawyered statement about lessons learned, and quietly written the vehicle off. SpaceX just sends a tugboat. The public narrative is always about the explosions and the drama. The internal narrative is about iteration speed. Every day that Ship 40 was floating out there, it was still teaching them something about thermal protection, about sea states, about recovery logistics. The cost of the tow is trivial compared to the cost of building the next one from scratch without the lessons. That's systems thinking at industrial scale. Most organizations optimize for looking competent. SpaceX optimizes for becoming competent. And looking competent is a side effect that sometimes arrives late. There's also a persuasion angle. Every time they recover something that should have been lost, they reinforce the story that they are playing a different game. The audience starts to believe that the rules which apply to Boeing or Lockheed simply do not apply here. That's useful. It attracts talent, it attracts capital, and it makes the next impossible-sounding timeline feel slightly less impossible. Christmas Island becomes part of the lore. 10 years from now, some engineer will tell the story of the time they towed a starship across half an ocean, and it will sound like myth, which is exactly how you want your origin stories to sound. Then we have Google buying Spirit Airlines' data archive for $10 million in a bankruptcy auction. This one is quiet and therefore more interesting. Spirit is dead, or at least the corporate form is dead. The planes will fly under new colors, the routes will be absorbed, the brand will fade. But the data, years of booking patterns, pricing experiments, customer complaints, no-show rates, ancillary revenue tests, that data is still alive. 10 million is a rounding error for Google. For the information it contains, it's a steal. Airlines are forced to run continuous real-world experiments on human behavior under constraint. How much will people pay to choose a seat? How late can you announce a delay before the social media rage becomes material? What combination of fees maximizes revenue without triggering regulatory attention? Spirit was the laboratory for the purest form of that experiment, the ultra-low-cost carrier that treated passengers as a cost center to be minimized. Google doesn't need another airline. Google needs the behavioral data set. Combined with everything else they already know about you, those Spirit records become another layer of predictive power. The company that already knows what you searched for at 2 a.m. now knows how you behaved when the only flight that fit your budget had a 6-hour layover and a $45 bag fee. That's not about selling plane tickets. That's about refining the model of human decision-making under scarcity. In the attention economy, scarcity is the ultimate teacher. Spirit spent years teaching the market how far you can push people before they break. Google just bought the textbook for pocket change. Notice the contrast with the Penn State story. In one case, young men are running a black market logistics network and getting indicted. In the other, a $1 trillion company is buying the digital remains of a failed logistics network and nobody bats an eye. Both are about extracting value from human desire and constraint. One is illegal because the product is cocaine. The other is celebrated because the product is data. The underlying human software is identical. Next up, the acquitted killer who flees the United States on a weekend pass from a Virginia facility. This is the story that makes the system look like performance art. A man is acquitted of murder, meaning a jury looked at the evidence and said the state did not prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. That is supposed to be the end of the state's power over him regarding that charge. Yet somehow, he is still in a facility that grants weekend passes. And on one of those passes, he simply leaves the country. The details will dribble out over the next week. Immigration status, exact charges that kept him in the facility, which agency dropped the ball. But the pattern is already clear. The justice system has become a collection of overlapping bureaucracies that no longer share a common definition of reality. Acquittal means one thing in the courtroom. It means something else in the civil commitment or immigration or mental health track. Weekend passes exist because the facility is optimized for liability management and staffing ratios, not for public safety in the absolute sense. The man who understands the seams in the system better than the people running it simply walks through one. This is what happens when you build a system that prioritizes process over outcome, and then staffs it with people who are evaluated on compliance rather than results. Everyone involved can produce a memo showing they followed the rules. The net result is that a person the system once claimed was dangerous enough to try for murder is now somewhere else on the planet with a head start. The public will demand accountability. A few mid-level officials will be reassigned. The underlying architecture will remain untouched, because changing it would require admitting that the architecture is the problem. Systems protect themselves first. People are secondary. Finally, Nike shares at 2014 levels after years of decline. This is the cultural tell. Nike was never just a shoe company. It was a permission structure. For decades, it told young men and women that greatness was available if you just did the work. And it wrapped that message in the most effective commercial propaganda of the modern era. Then the company decided that the highest status move was to become a political actor. The market has been delivering its verdict ever since. When your core customer base starts to feel that the brand no longer likes them, they stop giving it money. It really is that simple. All the sophisticated brand management language in the world cannot override the basic primate signal. This tribe no longer includes me. The stock price is just the scoreboard. The deeper story is the loss of narrative monopoly. Nike used to own the story of athletic aspiration. Now that story is fragmented across dozens of smaller brands, some of which are explicitly positioning themselves as the anti-Nike. Once you lose the ability to define the emotional meaning of your own product, the product becomes a commodity, and commodities compete on price and distribution. Nike is discovering what every formerly dominant culture producer eventually discovers. The audience was never obligated to keep listening. Put the 5 stories together and you get a diagnostic. Elite educational institutions are running parallel black markets while maintaining a public face of moral seriousness. The most competent engineering organization on the planet is still willing to chase its hardware across an ocean because the data is worth more than the embarrassment. The most powerful information company on the planet is quietly buying behavioral exhaust from a failed airline because human weakness is a renewable resource. The justice system has become so process-obsessed that an acquitted man can exit the country on a scheduled pass. And the once dominant cultural brand is watching its market value revert to a decade-old baseline because it forgot that customers are not NPCs in its political simulation. None of this is new. It is simply more visible. The American system still produces extraordinary competence in narrow domains: rockets, data extraction, logistics under constraint. It simultaneously produces extraordinary incompetence in domains that require shared reality and long-term accountability: elite socialization, criminal justice, cultural stewardship. The gap between the two is widening. That gap is the story of our time. The coffee is cooling. The simultaneous sip is over. But the pattern recognition doesn't stop when the mug is empty. These 5 headlines are not anomalies. They are the system showing you its source code, one ridiculous data point at a time. Watch what happens next. The fraternity kids will recycle into the professional class with better operational security. Ship 40's lessons will show up in the next flight test. Google will fold Spirit's data into models you will never see. The fugitive will become a footnote or a diplomatic incident, depending on which country he chose. And Nike will either rediscover that its customers are not a problem to be fixed, or it will continue its long, slow march toward becoming just another logo on clearance racks. The universe doesn't care which outcome we prefer. It only cares about the feedback loops. Right now, the feedback loops are loud. The only rational response is to keep watching, keep testing your models, and keep your own talent stack sharp enough that you can still navigate whatever version of the system is still standing in 5 years. That's the real simultaneous sip, the recognition that the game is still playable if you refuse to look away. And with that, the mug is empty. Same time tomorrow. Bring your own vessel.